Alright, so this is the question that gets tossed around whenever a new season comes out. Stonewall, what champions do you think are going to excel in the next season? In varying words, of course. First of all, before I answer this, I gotta go through a few very important disclaimers. Number 1, clearing time is no real indicator of viability. Just because a champion cleared well doesn't mean they are suddenly godlike. Just because a champion cleared poorly doesn't mean they won't become contested picks. Ganking, teamfighting, and everything aside from clearing was not tested because it's basically just the same as it has always been. The only thing that would change with jungle changes is the jungle phase and the transitioning beyond that. Indirect changes matter the most towards balance and pick bias. If the new items are really strong and desired in a certain champion, then they will be picked even if their clearing isn't perfect. I also want to use this change to further explain meta health and what the ranking system was before. People thought it was a tier list, but it wasn't. It was a way to measure meta health and the staying power a champion has when things shift. I guarantee you that, in some way, the meta will shift. It could have similar junglers, but the wealth of changes coming in will guide the meta to a certain direction. For the first month or two, we will have a very wild meta where everyone will be doing everything, but slowly the more successful champions will start cropping up, and then the more successful compositions will begin to form. Once the meta is settled, you'll start seeing certain champions shoved out or brought back from obscurity. As explained in the other video, rank B junglers are going to be the ones most affected by this. Those in that pool of champions have a good chance of becoming the next top dogs in the next few months if the meta shifts into something that highly favors them. Rank A champions will likely be the first ones in the radar and maybe the first ones people experiment with, since they're already strong and easiest to verify their strengths in a new meta, and the S rank junglers are likely to stay relevant in some way. Here is another kicker. Meta health usually does not change unless the champion receives considerable changes. This also applies to indirect changes such as map changes, item changes, and so on. S rank junglers do have a chance of falling out of S rank if the game becomes less glorious for them with all these changes, and the others can ascend and descend as well. As for the C rank, be prepared to see a lot of them. The C rank junglers are usually those who are rarely meta, so they're rarely seen in competitive. This does not mean there can't be strong picks in solo queue or that they can't carry. It's that they simply don't have favorable environments. That said, the times that they do become favored isn't when they are somehow super useful, but because they become super overbearing. All of a sudden, this champion is overpowered and they just start slaughtering everybody. The ranking system was important to bring up because it leads into me talking about the jungler everyone is all hyped about. Not Graves, but Tryndamere. That clear video of his was ridiculous. His clear, his speed, his health were top notch. Having low health is one of the things that kept him in check and made sure he didn't rampage from the jungle. I'll just straight out say that Tryndamere is likely the most powerful example of a farming jungler, and I say this even before Season 6 even arrived. He farmed and just farmed, and he was very efficient at it past the first clear. The problem with Tryndamere is that he purely is the incarnation of damage. He is not very efficient in combat. He simply cleaves people in half in record time. You have other farm junglers who combat using slick moves and immunities, but Tryndamere, aside from his slow, is kind of just hitting you really hard. When Yi hits you, it's like getting hit by a truck. When Tryndamere hits you, it's like being hit by a train that is transporting various trucks. This is why even though Tryndamere's farming improved a lot, it doesn't really fix his team fighting. His transition will be really fucking good though, so it will help him leave the jungle phase better, but the point still stands. He's a C rank for a reason. Still, as I explained, he could very well become overbearing in solo queue, as there's very little you can do to stop him from farming, and he's gonna farm all day and then obliterate your team. If Riot nerfs several key masteries because they're obscene on a lot of champions, then Tryndamere could likely just revert back to what he used to be. So my prediction on Tryndamere is this: he will be awesome in solo queue because you can get away with farming non-stop, and his farming was improved tremendously. He could even be played in more serious environments for a while, but he will likely face a nerf either directly or indirectly, or the meta will happen to not support him once it shifts into place. Before I head into the pool of other junglers, I have to talk about the only two losers I saw for jungle clearing. There were other champions that also technically failed, but they're special cases because I forced full clears on everyone rather than level 3 clears. The two junglers I noticed were having a worse clear than before were Rammus and Malphite. I can easily attribute Malphite's worst clear for the masteries more than anything else. He loses out on some of the masteries that would have helped him clear a bit better. That said, he doesn't have an extreme problem, it just feels like it became worse than before. Still, he's a champion that fits a certain type of team composition and dealing with a certain type of champion. If those become relevant, then lane and jungle Malphite can become a thing again. As far as Rammus goes, if this is any indicator of a needed rework or skill overhaul, then I don't know what is. He simply does not improve with every jungle season and just becomes this pick people will use in solo queue to dominate unsuspecting people. His clearing weakness is that his clearing speed is tied to his W, which is essentially a channel. It only gives you clearing power when you're getting hit, which depends solely on the discretion of monsters. It's just really sad to watch. Anyhow, as for the larger pool of junglers, the biggest factor that will influence them is the flow of the game. I feel Riot is intending to make the game faster by making the jungle weaker and giving people less gold dumps. Think about it. I jungled with potions in the videos, but I'd likely get the refill of a potion when I get leashes. That saves gold, a lot of gold. We no longer have to spend gold on wards either aside from pink ones. The Herald is now in the game, which also is a huge pushing buff to whoever kills it. Marksmen are also getting reworked in ways that make them more powerful beyond items, although their items also became more attractive and cheaper. Mages are also getting shafted in items as they're going to cost more. This coincidentally could make the meta faster as it causes mages to seek times where their base values of their abilities can make them excel. This also means that other players may not be as afraid to fight mages around mid-game since they won't have yet reached the instant murder powers they're known for. This is purely speculation of course, but I do feel it's going to become a fast meta. This means that the compositions most likely to succeed are early aggro compositions, push compositions, and utility compositions. Champions that excel at early domination are likely the first ones we'll see crop up. The meta could start off fast and then slow down once people figure shit out. That said, I am certain you're already starting to think about some early game junglers and lane champions that could potentially see a resurgence. Straight out, Nidalee has a good chance of becoming an attractive pick again. She's an early game aggressor and helps control the map when there's going to be less wards going around. She's also a safe champion and can keep out of range against enemies, which will likely be vital in the early metas as everyone can just blow each other up. She's mobile enough to cover the Herald and the Dragon, and she'll be very valuable for pushing compositions. Admittedly, she's already A rank in the meta health, which is high to begin with. Still, if, and only if, the meta does become fast, she's my number one jungle prediction. If the meta doesn't go towards poke or early aggression, then I wouldn't consider her a top contender. Since we're talking about early aggression, we can't ignore Lee Sin. He's one of the gods of early snowballing and kicking faces in. He'll make an appearance if the meta gets faster and he'll become a big threat. There really isn't much to say about him, right? Because everybody should know what Lee Sin is capable of now. Assassins are also favored in early aggression metas, so you might see some jungle assassins pop up. Any jungler with assassin qualities or even just pseudo-assassin ones like Jarvan will be favored once again, although Jarvan technically is already there anyhow. I'm banking on Kha'Zix at least seeing some resurgence if he's able to deal with a new marksman. If he becomes a champion that can easily snuff some of them out, then he'll make a return. As far as Pantheon goes, I'm unsure about him since he's definitely about the early game, but his momentum problems are still prevalent and may cause him some trouble. Nunu may also see a resurgence if the meta speeds up. Control becomes very valuable during fast metas as Control can deter ganks and thus weaken early aggression teams. He would also be powerful enough to contest key objectives like the Dragon and the Herald, and his Blood Vial is an artificial gold boost to his teammates, which becomes even more valuable because marksmen are going to be very different now. As a point of reference, buffs and debuffs become more valuable during fast metas as they are the only way of bestowing or robbing gold from champions who right now don't have that much. If the meta becomes about early pushes and skirmishes, then Dr. Mundo might rise again. He's one of the few junglers that can participate in pokes while actually having poke that can chunk people. He farms incredibly fast, albeit almost dies doing it, and has a very low item requirement, and he just builds health and multiplies the value of his gold. He also transitions very well past the jungle phase, although of course packing little utility in teamfights. He's also very strong at taking objectives and could be a very strong champion to fight the Herald with either as a tank or the DPS. Still though, Grievous Wounds becoming more prevalent now could just utterly shut this prediction down. We'll see what Riot decides to do with that type of itemization. Maokai could come in top lane or in jungle, but he might see a return as well. The artificial gold value of his ultimate is ridiculous. It makes him sturdy early, and it destroys a lot of the damage potential from enemy mages early on. Considering mages aren't going to be as strong as before, this could become even more valuable. Admittedly, him as a jungler can restrict objective control, so he may be relegated to top lane if anything. He's one of my more bottom pole predictions. Vi is far stronger in the early game than she is late, unless she's snowballing. Knowing this, she has the potential to be a key jungler for team compositions relying on early fights. I predict her seeing some play, although only specifically for aggro engage compositions, looking to stump any poking and clumsy shenanigans teams might be trying to pull off. She's good at catching that one champion and blowing them up, or at least setting her team to blow up that one champion she managed to grab. One of the dark horse predictions is Trundle. This is only if specific meta shifts occur, in that it would shift into a pushing meta with a control aspect. Trundle is strong at taking objectives and he's strong in pushing compositions. While he himself does not assist in the actual pushing, his wall can disrupt enemy attempts at aggroing and making his team's poking much more deadly. If the meta shifts into having just one tank, then Trundle is a surefire champion to tear through those compositions. As far as the other S-rank junglers go, Elise, Gragas, and Rek'Sai will likely still be strong. Rek'Sai is powerful in early metas, and her tunnels can help her at least secure objectives or protect them. Elise is just a toolbox champion and has a relative safety to deal with early aggression, and also the means to enact it herself. Gragas can poke, although generally weak, but his mobility, innate tankiness, and his range initiation will make him valuable in an early meta where versatility is valuable. Those are my predictions. Admittedly, they're not that many because I submit that what's going to matter the most is how the marksmen turn out. They're usually the driving force a team rallies behind. If Kog'Maw becomes hyper-violent, then protect compositions become a thing. If Sivir is out of control, then they'll rally behind your push. If Caitlyn becomes the queen bitch, then siege comps will rise again. I think because of the extremes of their reworks, the meta will depend a lot on them, even if it's not the sole deciding factor. For the basic summary of the video, I feel a faster meta is on the horizon, so faster type of compositions and champions will be fighting for supremacy. We could have an early aggro meta, a push meta, or a control meta. Even so, I feel whoever ends up being the best marksman will sway how the meta flows in the end. This channel is supported by my sponsors, Crunchyroll, Pro Build Systems, and Loot Crate. Check out the description below for links to the websites. Signing up for any trials, including Crunchyroll's free anime trial, greatly supports my channel. Also remember to give the video a like to support the channel and subscribe if you haven't yet.